yeah, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I pieced out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but I don't wanna pay. I've been on furlough since May. Now I'll go and listen to a Cockney attitude. Ooh, breaking away. Got to find a better way. I'd rather watch Auf Wiedersehen again and listen to what these old men have to say.
And hello, and guten Tag, and welcome back to episode 2 of Auf Wiedersehen Again, with myself, Andy Sledge, and my co-host, Mr. George Bradley. George, how the devil are you on this fine and wonderful day?
Yeah, guten Tag. Yeah, pretty good. Looks like a nice day out there. Might actually leave the house today for a walk.
I was going to say, you look like you've got a bit of sunshine coming through your window in London there.
Yeah, it's lovely. About the best day so far, I think. Yeah.
Well, there was a bit of frost on the car when I came out this morning, but yeah, it's certainly looking like it's getting a wee bit better. And obviously, it is. We're actually filming this, so we're filming this on the Friday, which is the 26th, which is also the day that episode 1 is being released. So as we are filming episode 2, episode 1 is about to be released. So hopefully what's going to happen is we're going to get to the end of filming this episode, and then we're going to go and check, and we're going to have a million billion downloads, and the world is going to
be a great sponsorship deal.
Exactly. We're going to have sponsorship deals falling out of our arse, and we're going to have Jimmy Neal's going to be queuing up to be a guest, and we're going to have the world is going to be wanting to talk about Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Is our lobster.
Exactly. So, Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast. We welcome all constructive criticism or even abuse at this stage. We even welcome abuse at this stage. So if you would like to get in contact with either myself or George, you can do so on email, which is aufwiedersehenagain@gmail.com. That's aufwiedersehenagain@gmail.com. Please follow us on Instagram at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. That's Instagram at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at Auf Again. That's AUFAGAIN. Twitter at Auf Again. We have a Facebook page, which is Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Please like the Facebook page and share it among your friends. And we would also encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, and click the bell, which will alert you to any upcoming releases. And all episodes should be released at Friday at 10 a.m. And we're also available on all good podcast platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcast Breaker, Soundcloud, and many more. And we have to mention, so on the first episode, I did get to include it, but we didn't actually get it through till a bit later on. We have our theme music, which has been written and sung and performed by the guitar man himself, Mr. Lee Dosky. So the theme music to Auf Wiedersehen Again, written and performed by Lee Dosky. So please do like and subscribe to the channel wherever you get your podcasts. And Auf Wiedersehen Again is sponsored by Top Gun Tattooing, which is in number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. Their website is www.topguntattoo.co.uk, and their phone number is 01189 968 667, and they offer a fantastic 20% discount to anyone that contacts them. Now, there's a specific thing that you've got to do. So the owner, Glenn, has designated his employee, Zach. So Zach is one of the tattooists in the studio. He's an award-winning tattooist. And what you have to do is you have to either call up the shop on 01189 968 667, or go into the shop in person and say to Zach, Hadaway and Shite Man. And if you go in and say Hadaway and Shite Man, you will get a 20% discount on your tattoo from Top Gun Tattooing.
Can you tattoo your sack though? That's the thing.
I believe so. They will tattoo any part of your body. Now, if any of our viewers want to go into Top Gun Tattooing and get a Neville and Lottie tattoo on their arm, I will pay for it. So if you want a free tattoo, but you've got to get the heart with Neville and Lottie on the arm, I will pay for it. So if you want a free tattoo, email us on Auf Wiedersehen Again at gmail.com and contact Top Gun Tattooing, our podcast sponsor, and they will tattoo that absolutely free of charge, and I will pick up the bill.
Sounds like a good deal, I think. Sounds like a good deal.
I mean, what about you, George? Why don't you come and get it?
Well, yeah, possibly, yeah. I'll surprise you. Yeah.
So that's all the boring stuff out of the way. So this today's obviously episode 2 of Auf Wiedersehen Again, and we are specifically going to be talking about series 1, episode 2 of Auf Wiedersehen Pet, and the title of the episode was Who Won the War Anyway? And this was originally aired on the 18th of November 1983. So, George, who won the war anyway? If I said to you, who won the war anyway, apart from Auf Wiedersehen Pet, what does that make you think of?
Probably a very well-known comedy show in the 70s, I think.
Yeah, and what's that?
Fawlty Towers.
Absolutely. So I was a huge Fawlty Towers fan as a child. In fact,
I saw, yeah.
When we've done Auf Wiedersehen Pet, we might do Fawlty Towers. I was actually thinking about this. You know, once all the episodes of Auf Wiedersehen Pet are done, what do we move on to? And I was thinking about either Porridge or other Ian Lafreniere and Dick Clement shows. But now we've brought up Fawlty Towers, we might want to look at that. But so Fawlty Towers, where there was the episode with the Germans, and Basil Fawlty was doing the silly walk and doing all of this. And he screamed at the Germans, "Who won the bloody war anyway?" And he was and throughout the episode it was like, "Don't mention the war, don't mention the war." I think I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it. So who won the war anyway? Written by Dick Clement and Ian Lafreniere, as usual, directed by Roger Bamford. This is the episode where the final member of the Magnificent Seven comes in, and we finally get to meet Moxie. So the episode itself starts with the proper credits. So in our first episode, obviously the show started with Neville, with the infamous Dearest Brenda line on the back of the ferry going from Harwich to Holland. Yeah. Now, obviously they didn't have the normal credits. So what they've done is for the first time, we see the proper credits. Now, the credits of the show are designed to paint a picture of, drudgery and depression, amongst Britain. So there was Dennis was in the job centre. Neville was looking through the window of the job centre. Wayne was in front of the poster, and that was
Labour isn't working.
Yeah, Labour isn't working. And I actually remember that, even though it was, I would have been, I would have been 7 at the time, something like that.
I was 18.
George. But yeah, I remember those posters being up everywhere. And, so Wayne's in front of that very famous, iconic billboard from that time. Moxie's just getting out of prison. Oz is,
jumping over a wall.
Jumping over a wall, doing a midnight flit from his missus, obviously. And Barry's motorbike's broken down. It looks like it's broken down by the side.
It's funny, he mouthed something. I was trying to figure out what he was mouthing, but I couldn't work it out. You know, the motorbike breaks down.
Probably not a swear word known, Barry.
No, yeah. Oh, shoot, or something, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely not busting. So, and then what was made famous was the way that the titles pan across the map. And so it starts in England, it pans across Europe, and it settles in Dusseldorf, and they do a circle around Dusseldorf. So the famous and the iconic credits, opening credits for the show, that's the first time we see them. And the first scene is there is an overview of the building site. And there is something which I found very, very funny. And it's they focus in, and there's a guy on a crane. Now, was there anything in particular that you noticed about this, George?
Yeah, I think their clothing was very Germanic.
Yeah, but also the lack of safety equipment.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you know, if you wanted to go up the top of a crane these days, you'd need a helmet, a high vis, steel toe cap boots, you'd need a safety line, you'd need someone to hold your hand, you'd need to go on a course to find out about, you know, trauma of people that climb up cranes. And, and you know, and then you'd need counseling when you came down. Whereas, you know, this guy is, you know, just dressed in his normal clothes on the top of a crane, like walking along the top of a crane without an absolute care in the world. So yeah, it's a stark difference between, you know, how things used to be and obviously how things are today. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, I'm all for a bit of safety, but, you know, sometimes they can take things a bit too far. So the camera pans over, and they show Oz, Bomber, and Dennis laying bricks. So this is the sort of beginning of the episode proper, and you know, you can just, you know, things there. It shows that the guys seem to have sort of settled into a routine.
Yeah.
And you know, so they've been there for a few weeks now, and they're doing their job, and they're cracking on and they're laying bricks. So a German worker walks past carrying a radio, and the radio is playing a song. Now, the song is originally a song that's in English, but it's been translated into German. So you're more from that era, George. What song was actually playing on the radio there?
Yeah, Sheena Easton, My Baby Takes the Morning Train, or 9 to 5, I think it's proper title.
That's right. Well, and then so Oz starts singing along in slang, like, and he says, "Shagans to Grafton, back again." So Oz sings along, but he's in slang, but he's
in his own language.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and he's in a third language, and but Oz is absolutely dumbfounded that the Germans have taken an English song and changed it into German, and he's like, why can't they write their own songs? And then what is it he says to he asks Dennis, he says, does that rhyme? And Dennis says, oh, aye, and he has a little sideways glance at Bomber, and they obviously share an in joke there, the fact that they're taking the piss out of Oz a little bit. And then so again, Oz attempts to communicate with the German builder, and as we've already discussed, the Oz is very, very broad and slang Geordie, and it's like gets to the point where, you know, some of it even I struggle to understand. And so obviously, a German is definitely not going to understand them. And so Oz says to the German, he says, "Can you not write your own songs, like?" And the German looks at him and says, "Was? Like what?"
Yeah.
And then and the German, and he says something, he says a sentence in German, which I believe you pointed out, you think it's basically he's saying, I don't understand you.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. And then Oz, basically the German says something, a sentence in German, and Oz basically says, aye, that's easy for you to say. So, this entire episode is, the foundation of this episode is being laid, about Oz's, xenophobia and hatred for, the things German, and but also his inability to see his own shortcomings.
That's it.
When it comes to, like Oz is one of these people where Oz thinks he's perfect. If he genuinely believes everything that he says and does is 100% true and accurate.
And he likes saying his piece. Yeah.
And it's like, the very concept that he could be fucking wrong in any kind of tiny little facet is so alien to him that he's like, what? So like I say, he speaks to the German speaks back, he's like, that's easy for you to say. And it just, like I say, this entire episode, the theme of this entire episode from that moment forward is just Oz being a bit of a twat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it cuts. So then the next thing is, the next scene is they show some German carpenters cutting bits of wood. Now, did you? You mentioned about the clothing earlier on. Did you see what the German carpenters were wearing?
Was it like kind of Lederhosen kind of?
Well, sort of. So they had. I noticed it as being quite Oktoberfesty type clothing. Now they're not wearing actual lederhosen, but they've got these. They've both got these leather waistcoats on, which I'm assuming it would be a popular thing for German tradesmen to wear. And one of them's got like the Oktoberfest kind of hat on. And like I say, if you went to Oktoberfest, I'm pretty sure there'd be people at there just like those German chippies.
And very drunk.
Well, and very drunk as well, which is quite funny. Again, you see it later on in the episode where, all the lads are standing there laying bricks, drinking beer. And
the good old days.
Yeah. Can you imagine drinking a beer on a building site these days? So, next we cut to our worrywart Neville, and Neville is again still pretending that he's a carpenter, and he's trying to saw a piece of wood.
Very badly. Yeah.
So did you see what the saw was doing?
Yeah, bending. Yeah.
So it's I'm sure that Kevin Whately himself can probably use a saw a little bit better than that.
Yeah.
But so Neville's saw's bending. Even to the untrained eye like us, he's clearly a fish out of water. He's clearly a fish out of water in the situation that he's in, and he's paranoid, rightly so. He's rightly paranoid. He says he's worried that the capo knows. So obviously capo is Herr Ulrich, and capo, is captain, boss. And obviously Herr Ulrich's talking to a German, and he's sort of glancing, like giving the odd sideways glance over at Neville and Wayne, and Wayne offers a fantastic piece of advice to Neville. What does Wayne say?
Just measure something.
That's it. He says, if you're, he says if the boss comes past, he says just get your tape measure out and start measuring. And look a bit busy. So Herr Ulrich is, coming across to the part where Dennis and Oz and Bomber are laying bricks, and Bomber gives the heads up. He's like, oh, the boss is on his way over, and Oz is like, oh, he's coming over, is he? And Oz puts downs tools and sits down, and basically on purpose, just to try and be a bit of a twat. He's like
grabs a Bex.
Yeah, he's trying to antagonize Herr Ulrich. He's trying to, show off in front of the lads that, he's not, he doesn't need, he doesn't, follow the rules in the same way that they do. And Bomber like sort of looks around at him and he's like, "You're balmy," And then Oz, in his typical fashion, quite loud, he says, "I don't go kowtowing down to authority." That's the point he's trying to make. So and then again, from what we spoke about in the last episode, that Oz has got this theme of talking about their situation as if they were in a prisoner of war movie, and he says so he's still continuing this theme of the prisoner of war movie, and he says all these Germans, he says now, what do they say? He says, "I was only obeying my orders." He goes, "That should be the national motto, what should be written on the flag or something like that."
A lot of them did say that.
Well, they did, at the Nuremberg trials.
That's it, yeah.
But they, like I say, Oz is trying to cement his, his position in the fact that, he doesn't want to do what everybody else is doing, and he feels that because he's a good worker, which by all accounts he is, he's a good bricklayer. If he feels because he's a good bricklayer, he feels it gives him the right to do what he wants, basically. Which, in a workplace, if you're the best at what you do, it does give you certain privileges, but that only goes so far, as we see later on.
We won the war anyway, so,
Yeah. And so Oz is also paranoid, and Oz is convinced that the Germans are talking about him. And Dennis says, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You can't speak German." And then Oz says the typical thing that most people say when they're in a foreign country. Like I say, when I used to live in Spain, I used to say this all the time. And he says, "I understand more German than what you think."
Yeah.
So basically, Oz is claiming that even though he can't speak a word of German, that he can understand it. And this is what a lot of people, like, I lived in Spain for 5 years, and a lot of English people in Spain will say that. They'll be like, "Do you speak Spanish?" And he'll be like, "No, but I understand it. I understand." And it's fucking bollocks. It's absolute bullshit. So, and then Herr Ulrich comes over, and Herr Ulrich speaks very good English, and he says, and obviously he's heard what Oz has said, and he replies, "And I understand more English than you think." He says, "I also understand the English phrase tea break."
Yeah.
And so he sticks it right on Oz. And Oz says, "Look," he says, "I do me bit the same as everybody else. And at the end of the day, there'll be the same number of bricks laid here than anywhere else."
Yeah.
Which is a fair argument. And, and Herr Ulrich agrees. He says that if this is true, then everything is okay. And so, Herr Ulrich's given him the benefit of the doubt. He's been a nice guy. I mean, he is a bit of a taskmaster. He is, but that's his job, to make sure that, the job's done correctly and on time.
Yeah.
And then as he's walking away, he says thank you in German. He says "Danke schön," and Oz comes out with his famous line,
"Donkey shite to you too."
And he says, "And donkey shite to you too, pal." And Dennis comes and asks him, and he says, "Oz, why do you antagonize people for no reason?" And Oz actually doesn't disagree with him. He just says, "Well, and Dennis tries to explain, he's saying, these German guys, they're just the same as us. They're just trying to do a job. And Oz he's one of them, has proven Oz has always got to have the last word in any argument, no matter what it is. And Dennis says, he says, "You've always got to have the last word." And he says, "It's like banging your head against a brick wall." And Oz says, "Aye, well, don't bang it against the German bit or it'll fall down." So, again, this is setting the tone for the episode. You know, the entire episode is going to revolve around, you know, a lot of it's going to revolve around Oz and his, you know, and his attitudes and behavior.
Belligerence, yeah,
towards all things German. So cut back to Wayne and Neville, and obviously Wayne basically is trying to convince Neville that being a carpenter is better than being a bricklayer. He's like, oh, it's a cut above, and Neville's like, there's no wrong with being a brickie. And Neville's obviously just, you know, his usual worried self.
Yeah.
And then we see the horn go. So as we mentioned in the last episode, you know, I feel that, you know, when the focus in on the horn and the horn for lunch goes, it's a trying to carry through the prisoner of war camp theme.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you were in a prisoner of war camp movie and someone escaped or something like that, that would be the kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, but the horn's gone for lunch, and so Neville and Wayne are looking to go to lunch, and our friend Helmet steps in, and Helmet speaks to Neville, and he's got a football in his hand, and he's obviously seen Neville playing football, and he tries to get Neville to come and have a kickabout, and Neville says, you know, I would. He said, but I've got to go and speak to someone. And then Wayne repeats Oz's line, and he says, yeah, I donkey shite all the same.
Yeah.
Then obviously the camera cuts, and the Germans are playing football on the lunch break, and you know there's the camera sort of, you know, from it's shooting down in a downwards angle. You see the comings and goings from the building site. You know, it's obviously a very, very busy place. You see Neville, and Neville heads into the bar, and so Oz and Dennis are sitting at a table, and Dennis is reading some papers.
Looking very serious. Yeah.
Well, yes, looking very serious, and you know, very much looking like he doesn't want to be disturbed.
Yeah.
You know, he's sort of, you know, he's got his back turned away. You know, he's looking down, and you know, he's got, so Oz is behind him over there, and he's trying to isolate himself. You know, albeit in a busy bar, but he's trying to get a little bit of peace and quiet. And Oz, you know, not reading the social cue, starts questioning him about what it is. And he says, what's that? And Dennis says, it's a letter from a solicitor's. And again, you know, sort of gives a fairly, you know, abrupt answer. You know, anybody else would have gone, oh, okay, and just left him alone.
Yeah.
And Oz is like, oh, what, someone left you some money in the will? And you know, he persists, and he digs, and then obviously Dennis is, you know, says it's the wife's solicitors, it's about his divorce. Then Oz decides that he's going to tell him a story about what again what Oz thinks is, you know, the gospel truth.
Yeah.
And Oz says, oh, when Arabs get divorced, all the man says is, I divorce you, and then they smash a glass. And then he goes, hold on, is that the Jews?
Yeah.
You know, so Oz is trying to impart some wisdom, but he's, you know, he's just full of shit. You know what I mean? The bottom line is he knows nothing. But you know, he's trying to, you know, he's like I say, he's trying to maintain the conversation. He obviously doesn't like he doesn't like the silence amongst the table, and he's very uncomfortable with it. And he just says, you know, in some places divorce are simple, and Den says, not in Berkeley, it's not. So obviously this gives a hint of where Dennis lives. So Berkeley is an area of Gateshead.
Yeah.
It's a little bit south of Newcastle, but that's where Dennis has obviously been living. And you know, they're talking about, Dennis starts talking about things like child maintenance and you know, and alimony and all of that.
Yeah, the reason he's there, yeah.
Well, exactly. And you know, this and then, you know, the way that Oz goes on proves that he's on a very different wavelength you know, to the way that Dennis is. He says, Dennis is obviously, Dennis is there to work his job and earn good money so he can send money back to his family. And Oz is all about keeping the money for himself.
He's on a jolly app.
Yeah, but exactly. He's like, Oz is like, oh, well, you want to keep some back for yourself? And Dennis is like, well, no, I don't. He's like, I want to make sure my kids are well clothed and well fed. And this concept is fucking alien. Like, Oz is like, aye, but you want to keep some for yourself? And Dennis is like, no, I don't. And just like I say, you just see the two totally contrasting attitudes around family. So anyway, Neville gets some drinks in and Neville comes to the table. And Neville is still very, very worried and is still in a very, very bad position about pretending to be a carpenter. And basically, Neville expects Dennis, to do something about this.
Yeah. Give him the guidance.
Yeah. And he even says, well, you got us into this. And obviously Dennis has already got the hump. He's got this letter from his wife's solicitor. He is not happy. He's reading this, and he's got the world just keep putting problems on his shoulders. And he says, I've got some problems of my own, And Neville says, well, what's that? And he says, that's my business. And, again, so Dennis is like, that's my business. Dennis has laid down the law. This is what it's about. I have my problems. You have your problems. Mine are my business. Yours are your business. We'll draw the line in the sand there, and I don't want anybody knowing about it. And Oz just sticks his massive foot in his even bigger mouth, and he just says, oh, he's getting divorced. And Dennis, the first cracks in Dennis's, normal, cool persona begin to show, and Dennis threatens Oz, and he says, someday someone's going to stick that fist down your big mouth. And he says, it might even just be me. And Oz is, what
have I done?
He's like, what have I done now? Like, is it like he genuinely doesn't know? He's genuinely like, what have I done now? And you're like, well, come on. Anybody else would realize, that what they had said was fucking, bang out of order. And Oz is, as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. But then Nev reads it a little bit better, and he sees that Dennis is upset, and sees that Dennis has got a lot on his mind, and he says, I'm really sorry, Dennis, I'm really, really sorry. And then there's a pause, and you can see Dennis go like, okay, thanks for your apology, kind of thing, and he goes back to reading his letter, and there's a pause at the table, and they're just sitting around the table, and then just when you think it's over, Neville hypes up again, and he says, but still, what's going to happen to me? Absolutely selfish and self-centered. And he's, just as much as, he knows that he just, he can't help himself. He needs to, he wants his situation to change. And he thinks that the only person that can change that situation is Dennis.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, after all his protesting, bless his heart, they cut to the admin hut, and Dennis and Neville are stood there in front of Herr Ulrich, and Dennis is coming clean. And he's explaining to Herr Ulrich that Neville is not a carpenter, that he's a bricklayer. And Herr Ulrich, the look of horror on his face, he's like, you fucking what? He's like, you have been here for nearly 3 weeks. And he says, how can this happen? And Dennis, tries to brush it off as he says, some kind of administrative cock-up. And obviously, the Germans...
Of course, they have the paperwork,
Well, this is it. But, Germans are very, very, they have... they don't, they aren't like the British, and they're not as slapdash as we are.
No. They made the trains run on time and stuff like that.
Exactly. So, and he says, I think not. So he speaks to Dagmar and asks, obviously in German, for Dagmar to get the paperwork out, and he reads the letter that he sent to Herr Pfister. He's like, here is my letter to Herr Pfister, dated August, and he says, you know, and he says, you know, about plasterers, and he says there's a missing plasterer who's coming today. That obviously opens up the door for Moxie later on. And he says, my requirement is exact, carpenters and bricklayers, only 2. There is no cock-up.
Cock-up.
So anyway, but then, so, you know, they stood there, and then Neville, you know, Herr Ulrich, he's been speaking in perfect English.
Yeah.
And Neville turns to Dennis and he goes, can you ask him if there might be a bricklaying job later on? And like, as if he's been speaking a different language, and Neville, and as if Dennis is fluent in that other language. And Dennis is like, he's speaking English, you know. And anyway, he's, you know, and Neville's like, oh, you know, you always put things better than me. Anyway, so, you know, then the big boss steps up, and it's Herr Grunwald.
Yeah.
So Herr Grunwald is obviously got the rage, and he comes in and he starts talking about, you know, compensation, etc. And just as a side note, I remembered when I was watching this that it flashed into my mind that we mentioned that Herr Grunwald was also in Grange Hill, which is a very popular TV program when I was a child, and he was called Mr. Bronson. And I never looked that up. It just came to me. It flew into my head. So,
and also in The Empire Strikes Back.
Absolutely. And we're actually going to talk about that in a second, because Barry mentions The Empire Strikes Back in a very short period of time. So we'll come back. That's a very, very good point there, George. And we will come back to that in a second. So Herr Grunwald, he is obviously not happy at all, and he says something very, you know, stern in German, and then he walks out of the hut, and Herr Ulrich sits back in his chair and he says, today you do not work. He goes, I must think. So, you know, he's obviously sort of keeping Nev on tender hooks. So Nev goes back to get his stuff, and, you know, Wayne says, you know, look, don't worry, man, he'll be all right. He's just on a bit of a power trip. And then our friend Helmut steps up again.
Yeah.
And he's obviously heard that Neville, you know, I mean, it must be a bit of a, you know, those building sites must be like proper gossip mills, you know.
Oh yeah.
And obviously, you know, someone pretending to be a carpenter who's a bricklayer, that's probably, you know, that news will rattle around that building site, you know, like fucking women washing their clothes down by the river in the old days. And Helmut comes up and he says sorry, and he says, I think you know, like Germany. And Neville's like, no, it's not that. It's just, you know, and then obviously they start talking about their wives, show each other pictures of the wives.
Yeah.
Then Helmut invites Neville round his house later on, and he says, you come and you eat and we drink, and, you know, family, you meet my family. So
proper German house.
Exactly. So Helmut's being a real nice guy and inviting Neville round to his house, you know, to meet his family, and Helmut's offering that olive branch, you know, between the Germans and the English. And like, obviously Wayne, Neville says yes, and Wayne, like, Wayne looks like he's just fucking found a piece of shit in his lunchbox. Like, Wayne's got a real funny look about, you know, when Neville accepts Helmut's invitation. So they cut back to the hut, and so Oz is lying on his bed reading, Barry's ironing his shirt, and Bomber's chatting away. And Barry starts talking about what they're going to have for their dinner. They've got a whole host of gourmet choices.
Sausage, egg and beans.
You know, tinned tomatoes, fried bread. And then Oz says, why can't we all have what we all want? And Barry's like, it doesn't work like that, does it? And Barry's very much, you know, the politician, and he's on the democracy vibe already. And he says, well, if everyone does that, what do they have? He goes, we'll have anarchy. You know, Barry thinks that one person having tomatoes and one person having beans is going to cause anarchy in the hut. But this opens the door for Barry to, Barry pitches his idea to the group about the hut having an elected leader. And he talks about when he lived in Mönchengladbach, and he said the hut, they had the leader was called Hacksaw. And this is where he starts talking about Empire Strikes Back. So he says, you know, when he was in Mönchengladbach, everyone in the hut was going to go to the cinema, and some of the people wanted to see Empire Strikes Back, and some people wanted
Swedish sex film.
Some people wanted to see a Swedish sex film. I'm like, well, you know, what a choice. Me personally, I think I'd have gone for the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
But as you've already said, George, very good point, well made, that in The Empire Strikes Back is the actor, I think it's Michael Sheard, his name is, who plays Herr Grunwald and who played Mr. Bronson.
And he was Admiral Ozell in Empire Strikes Back.
Look, your Empire Strikes Back knowledge astounds me there, young George. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, you know...
That's where it ends, actually.
So Barry's talking about Barry's, you know, trying to sell the idea for having an elected leader within the hut, and Wayne automatically assumes that because Barry's brought up the idea of being of someone being a leader, that Barry wants to be the leader, and Barry's like, well, actually, no. He's like, I just want someone like Barry.
Wants to take direction from someone else.
Exactly. Yeah. Barry obviously doesn't like making his own decisions. Barry prefers someone to do that for him.
Yeah.
So Dennis enters the hut, and Bomber asks Dennis if he wants to be the leader, and he makes a bit of a joke about it. He says about, you know, beans or fried bread, and then Oz, for some reason, again, you know, Oz has been, you know, Dennis has looked after Oz, and Oz just, for some reason, decides to have a fucking dig at Dennis. And he says, you know, oh, well, you didn't do a very good job for Neville, did you?
Mm.
Now, just on a side note, there, at this point in time, we see something which we never see again. And there is a random guy.
That's it. Never speaks. Yeah.
Has no lines. So he's the only apparently he's the only person we ever see in the hut who never speaks. So basically, Dennis comes in and he goes into the little cage bit of the thing where they all keep their tools, and then this other guy is in the cage hanging up his tools, and then this guy walks out. So random guy in the hut. And so Dennis puts his tools down, he comes out, he stands above Oz's bed, and he says, what? And then basically Oz tries to blame Dennis for everything. And you can see that, you know, Dennis has got, like, you know, Dennis's blood is boiling. And he's like, you know, he's half like looking at Oz going, what the fuck's this bloke saying? You know, he can't believe it. He can't believe the fact that Oz has got the gall to say something bad.
Yeah.
All he's done is try and look after him. And then Oz says, oh, I don't want someone who backs down in front of the crowds.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Oz is mental, you know. You know, Oz is like, you know, Oz is fighting a war that finished, you know.
Yeah. He's carrying it on.
You know, Oz is having an argument. Like Oz could have an argument alone in a phone box. You know what I mean? And that's what he's doing. You know, Oz is convinced that there's an us and them, and but he's the only one. You know, he's living in this fantasy world that you know, there's an us and them, and he's got to be on your side and da 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 da. And you know, Dennis is, you know, the voice of reason. And you know, Oz is just being belligerent as always and bad mouthing, and so Dennis puts it on him, and Dennis stands up and he comes over and he goes, Oz, he says, why are you here? You know, and like Oz is like, what? And he goes, why? He goes, if you don't like it, why are you here? And it's a very, very, very valid question. And Oz says, well, it makes a change. And Dennis says, yeah, it makes a change from the dole queue. And he says, you know, you should be grateful. You should be grateful the fact that, you know, you've got a job and you're earning good money.
Yeah.
And you know, Dennis sort of outlines how shit his life was. You know, he was, you know, going in the pubs at 11 o'clock, you know, picking the kids up from school. You know, and then his wife trying to make food from you know, trying to make a meal from tins. And Oz, so Oz says, aye, that's one of the reasons I'm over here, to get away from my wife's cooking. And then he fucking sticks his foot in it again. So he has a proper dig at Dennis, and he says to Dennis, and he basically, obviously, he's going back to the fact that Dennis is getting divorced. And he says to Dennis, oh, well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And as Neville says, he says it was pretty bloody tactless. I mean, a very, very tactless remark. And Dennis loses it. And Dennis flies across the hut.
What have I done now?
and luckily, Bomber steps in the way. And, you know, Oz is like, what have I said? What have I said? I mean, just has no idea. You know, he's as subtle as a brick through a plate glass window. And yeah, just, it's, you know, absolutely ridiculous. So the door opens. There's a break in the action. And the door opens and Moxie arrives.
Oh, yes.
So Moxie says, all right, you know, I was told to come to Hut B. And, you know, you can see by the look on their faces that they're not too happy with them. And Bomber tells him that he's made a mistake and that he's got to go to a different hut. And they're saying, you know, what happened? Why'd you do that? And he says, well, you know, I think we've, you know, obviously with all the shit that's just been going on, you know, Bomber's like, I think we've got enough problems as it is.
Yeah, no more room at the inn.
Fine.
Or that.
No more room at the hut, aye. Anyway, so Neville, having been in the admin hut earlier on, and Herr Ulrich said that there was another plasterer turning up. You know, Neville connects the dots, and he says, "Oh, that must be the missing plasterer." And he goes over, and he's got there's a round package wrapped up in brown paper, and he picks it up, and he says, "Whoa, it's a dartboard." So, you know, you've got to, you know, I was trying to imagine what it must have been like living in one of those huts, you know. So obviously this was, you know, before cable telly, before DVDs, before videos, you know. So, you know, living in that hut, you're either going to be playing cards, you know, they go and play,
listening to Barry,
yeah, whatever. You know, you know, reading was obviously going to be a big thing. You know, even Oz has got loads of books, and he doesn't strike you.
Drinking.
But yeah, drinking, reading, playing cards. That's basically what you're doing when you're not at work. And so, you know, Neville picks up the dartboard, and obviously this is just, you know, they've gone from having, limited forms of entertainment. You know, this dartboard could, you know, add an extra facet to their lives in the hut. And so Oz straight away is like, all right, yeah, we want that. And so he goes and he opens the door and he says, oh, come back, Moxie, come back. This is your hut. And so obviously Moxie walks back in the hut and he sees Neville standing there with a dartboard, and he utters his famous line. And what does he say?
I haven't got any darts though.
I haven't got any darts though. So yeah, but that's you know, Moxie bought his way into the hut with his dartboard. So it cuts to the shower block, the toilets in the shower block later on, Oz is shouting at Wayne, and Wayne sat on the carsey with his Walkman on, and then so Barry, goes back to the hut, and at this point Barry is now trying to forward his agenda of getting a hut leader. And what does he do? He tries to tap up Bomber. He's like, why don't you be our leader, Bomber? And like, Bomber's clearly not interested. And so he and Barry, you know, the never going to be a salesman. Barry tries to sell the idea to Bomber. And how does he try and convince Bomber to be the leader?
Well, he won't have to iron his own shirt. Someone will do it for him.
Yeah. So Barry thinks that by telling Bomber that one of the lads will iron his shirt, is going to convince Bomber to be the leader. Obviously, Bomber's just not interested in any way, shape, or form. So Nev talks about his tattoo, and Moxie, the new guy in the hut, obviously doesn't know the story, and he says, "Oh, there's some great artwork," and Moxie pulls up and shows off his own tattoo, and it's a fleur de lis. Now, Moxie, this shows Moxie's renowned for pronouncing things incorrectly.
Yeah.
And very, very famously later on, I think it's when they're in Cuba or one of the later seasons, when he's talking about his nephew, and he says, "Oh, my nephew's called Dewey." And they're like, everyone's like, "What are you fucking on about?" And he says, Dewey, G-U-Y. And they're like obviously, so he's, Moxie's the kid.
He has a bit of a stutter as well sometimes, doesn't he?
He does, which actually vanishes later on.
Yeah.
But he's so he pronounces it the fleur de lis. He goes, I've got this one, the fleur de lis, and Barry pipes up and he says, "Oh, I can't believe medical science can't get rid of them." Obviously, as we know now, you can get laser tattoo removal. That obviously wasn't an option in the early 80s. And then Oz, as always, never knowing when to keep his trap shut, starts up on he goes, "I've got a foolproof way for you to get rid of the tattoo." And, Neville never learns his lesson. So says, "Oh, aye, what's that?" And Oz says, "Application." Application. And then he goes, he starts to
the circular saw.
Exactly. Oz pipes up, starts, giving a fantasy version of events of how it could happen, and he's talking about him being a carpenter and not a carpenter, and da 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 da, and talks about him cutting his arm off with a circular saw. And again, it's just, Neville is, Neville. On the subject of his tattoo,
very touchy.
Not fucking interested in any way, shape, or form. He's got there's no joking about the tattoo with Neville. It's a very, very serious subject. But obviously Oz doesn't get that, and he just says, "You cannot take a joke, yous lot." So the cut from the hut, and they go to, an overview of the site, cranes moving around, diggers moving around, and the music that is, is sort of they're playing in the background is sort of very sort of dragnetty, sort of 70s cop show. And obviously everyone's gone back to work after lunch, and Neville's on his own.
Kicking his ball, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So Neville's gone and found a little quiet part of the site, and he's kicking a ball up against the wall. So Neville kicks the ball quite hard. It flies over the wall and it lands in a big hole. And Neville goes to get his ball back. And what happens? What does Neville find?
A big bomb.
It is a big bomb. So Neville gets in the hole. There's a German worker who's digging the hole. Neville sees the bomb, and he tries to stop the German worker digging the hole. And he's like, no, and the German's like, get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. Obviously, they're both speaking different languages. Anyway, so Neville lies down across the bottom like that. And
inches from his head.
digger comes out like that. And anyway, so Neville stops the digger from hitting the bomb, and Neville is judged to be a hero. So they cut to the admin hut, and Dennis is doing his bit with Herr Grunwald. He's trying
to plead Neville's case, isn't he, again? So.
Exactly. Dennis is, as much as, earlier on, the day before, I think it must have been the day before, or whenever, earlier on, Dennis is like, I've got my own problems, Dennis has got a heart of gold, and he really wants Neville to stay. So, he's doing his best. And so he goes and he says, look, we're sorry. Do you want me to apologize? We're sorry. And Herr Grunwald says there is a principle involved, which is fair enough. Anyway, somebody rushes into the hut, and I think the word "einen bomben."
Yeah.
And obviously, so Herr Grunwald grabs his hard hat and rushes out of the hut, and Dagmar turns to Dennis and speaks to Dennis and says that they have found a bomb. So they cut back to where the bomb is, and Herr Grunwald, you can hear it in Germany, says, call the police, call the army. And the German worker explains to Herr Grunwald in German how Neville saved the day. And Herr Grunwald turns around to Neville and says, that was very brave of you. So, that's, Neville has, you can sort of see that Herr Grunwald is now, a big fan of Neville's, and that he's done himself a right favour there in the fact that, now basically, they now owe Neville for saving the day.
Yeah.
And so he basically he says that the army, he says the army's going to see to it, and he says you should all go back to your huts.
Yeah.
So Oz, in typical fashion, continuing the theme of him being an absolute bellend, starts talking about it being a British bomb, and he tries to rub it in, and Oz says to Herr Grunwald, he says, well, it was us lot that flattened you's lot. Oz, determined, to, that the war was still a.
You should be proud it's British.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing. I mean, now, from where, from the early 80s to now, if you were walking down the street, there's not many people out there really give a shit about the World War anymore. I bet you there's 90% of the kids walking the street these days probably don't even know what it was. Probably pointed Germany on the map. Your average person these days is a bit of a thick fucking idiot. So. But in the late 70s, early 80s, it was still
nearly every the grandfather would have been in the war. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, I mentioned it in the last episode. My granddad, my opa, he was from Holland, and he got captured.
Right. Yeah.
During the war. So, there was a lot of, in my household, in my family, it was still, quite a fresh memory. But, and again, like they say, faulty towers, who won the war anyway, all of that kind of stuff. It was still very fresh. Like I say, these days, I don't think anyone really gives a shit. But he says, Oz is, trying to make a point that, he says, it was us lot that flattened you lot. And he says, that is a British bomb, isn't it? And Herr Grunwald, dry as a bone. Yeah. Herr Grunwald says, yes, it did not go off. Because I fuck you. So, they all cut back to the hut. They're all drinking tea, and now they're playing darts. And Oz, starts talking about how his uncle was on a Lancaster bomber.
Yeah.
And So never want to miss an opportunity. Barry decides that this could be the
He has a new victim, yeah.
Barry's like that, tries to sink the fangs into Neville. And he says, oh, what you did was amazing. He says, that's just the kind of quality of leadership that we need for this hut.
Yeah.
And then Neville's like, well, I doubt it. I'll be going home tomorrow. And Oz says, they wouldn't dare. And, Oz makes a valid point. And Dennis agrees. He says, you saved the day. And Bomber says, that bomb, it would, if it hadn't been for you, it would have killed an Eric. Would have killed one of the German workers. And Oz, not wanting to miss a trick, says, well, that was its original intention. Anyway, Dennis has got another weapon in his arsenal there to use to try and convince Herr Ulrich and Herr Grunwald that Neville can stay. And then Oz makes the point, again, not as daft as he sounds sometimes. Oz says, well, I hope we're all still being paid.
Getting a crack.
Yeah, well, Barry. So again, Barry, thinking he's clever, tries to use a turn of phrase and completely screws it up. And Barry says, that's a moot point, that is. It's very moot, which is actually the opposite of what it means. Moot point means it's irrelevant. It means it's no longer relevant to the conversation. Whereas, what they're actually talking about is very, very relevant. So, Oz, takes it upon himself to go and put this point across. So they've been told to stay in the hut. Oz goes out to the hut and he walks up to where the bomb is, and there's army people in the hole. They've surrounded the bomb with sandbags. It's clearly a very, very dangerous situation. And Oz, starts shouting at Herr Ulrich in very, very broad slang. And Herr Ulrich has got no time for Oz whatsoever. And he says, I hope we're getting what crack. What does that mean? That just, it doesn't mean any fucking, doesn't mean any,
well, it would nowadays. It would mean something else, but
yeah. So and Herr Ulrich's like, the look on Herr Ulrich's face, he's like, this bloke's a fucking lunatic. And he says, aye, we're getting what due. We want to be getting what due. Anyway, so Herr Ulrich loses the plot. He shouts at Oz. He says, go back to your hut. And Oz is like, well, as long as I've made me point. And then he says, oh, aye, and what about Neville? And Herr Ulrich says, actually, you can send Neville out. And Oz is talking about his job, and he goes, they want him for the news.
Yeah.
So Neville has obviously become a bit of a local hero. So they, in fact, 1 second, I'm just going to turn the heater off. Oh, God. I was hoping we could get through the episode without that interruption, but I'm actually dying of heat exhaustion here. So anyway, apologies for that interruption. So they cut to the bar, and they're all in the bar. Obviously, they've been given the afternoon off work, and so they're all in the bar getting drunk, and they're going to gather around the TV and watch the news when it comes on. So they question where Nev is, and someone says that that Nev was wearing a shirt and a tie, and he was going off somewhere. And then Wayne tells everyone that Neville has accepted the invitation, and he's on his way around to Helmut's place. And Oz is absolutely horrified.
Fraternizing with the enemy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that again, Bomber continues Oz's joke, doesn't he? Hoisted by his own petard. But he, just the look of so basically, what I say, Wayne says he's going around his house, and Oz is like, a German's house. And Wayne's like, well, yeah, that's what people do. They go around each other's houses for drinks and food. It's like, a German's house, just cannot believe the fact that Neville, and like I say, and Bomber makes that joke, and he says, "Oh, Neville fraternising with the enemy." Anyway, they're interrupted by the fact that the actual news program, so the local news program comes on. So it's probably 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever.
Yeah.
And they all gather around the TV. Oz is making a load of noise. Everyone's trying to shut up. Anyway, so Herr Grunwald comes on the TV and everyone boos. And obviously Herr Ulrich's there. And then the newsreader introduces Neville. And obviously then it cuts and Neville himself is at Helmets. And the newswoman starts asking him questions. And then obviously they speak to the German digger driver. And basically, the German digger driver gives Neville the full credit and says that he's Neville's the hero. And
I was reading a bit of trivia. Sorry, I was reading a bit of trivia about the actual news reporter, the woman.
Mm-hmm.
She was German, but she was employed by the British forces to teach the soldiers German. That was her day job.
All right.
Yeah.
What in that time frame? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, there you go. Look at that.
Don't know where I dug that up from, but yeah.
Hey, that's a cracking piece of trivia there, George.
Yeah.
That's a very. I'm sure there's no one who will have known that.
No.
In fact, if anybody did know that, email us in and let us know. You will also be on George.
And you'll get a free tattoo.
George, I will give you a free. We'll give you a free Neville and Lottie tattoo.
Yeah.
So Neville's at Helmets, and obviously they're sat with Helmets' family, his dad, his wife, his mother, and
did you know what the mother's called?
no, I didn't know, but she's English, isn't she?
I think so, yeah. But in the show, she's called Lottie.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So, well, let's hope it wasn't her that Neville met up with on the night when he got the. But I think we're probably safe. So yeah. So Helmut's mother, Lottie. So Neville's got Helmut's mother's name tattooed on his arm.
That's it.
I'm sure he keeps that one to himself. So they all toast Neville, obviously saying that he's a famous man, and then they go back to the bar, and then Oz is kind of, he's like, Oz has got his position up here about how he fucking hates the Germans, and then he'll give them a credit, or admit that they're not so bad in certain areas. And so he says, oh, they've got some canny boilers like the Germans. And sort of, Dennis is like, oh, is that it? Like, is that all you think? And he says, oh, the beer's passable. And then someone says, well, I think it's Bomber says, well, you pass enough of it. So, he's saying that the women are good looking and they've got good beer. And, obviously you can see in the background, there's the German workers are in the background and they're getting, they're looking over. You can see that they're looking at Oz. And
getting more and more annoyed.
Exactly. They're just getting the hump, which, and rightly so. So, Oz gets quite philosophical about being a bricklayer and, I do this and I'm laying bricks and da-da-da-da-da. And then Barry brings up the subject of Kevin Keegan. So obviously Kevin Keegan, when he left Newcastle, went to Hamburg. And Barry talks about, Keegan and his wife and how they learned the language and da-da-da-da. So, Barry thinks that, the fact that Kevin Keegan did that will be enough to make Oz, fall into line.
Yeah.
So, but Oz's only takeaway. So Oz says that, so when he left Germany, he went to Southampton, and he says, so what does that say about Germany if the better alternative is Southampton? And slagging Germany off. And so we see that the German workers have had enough. So there's the German scaffolder comes over and he taps Oz on the shoulder. And Oz turns around and he says, I have a question for you. And Oz thinks he's hilarious. And he says, oh, you want to see me papers, do you? Again, carrying on with the prisoner of war camp theme. And the German, rightly so, says to Oz, he says, if Germany is such a no good place. Why don't you piss off?
Back to England.
Yeah, and obviously then we like the camera focuses on Dennis, and you can see the look on Dennis's face. Dennis puts his hands over his eyes and braces himself, you know, because Dennis knows what's coming. So basically, you know, Oz has got a reputation for being, you know, being quite handy with his fists and being loose. And so obviously this German tells Oz to piss off, and I think, you know, Oz basically throws the first punch, and the scuffle ensues. And like I say, you know, Dennis is like, you know, because you know what's about to happen, and it obviously the scuffle all kicks off, and then as the fight breaks out, it then cuts back to the calm of Helmut's house. So Helmut, they're just finishing up the bottle of schnapps, and Helmut says he's going to go and get another bottle, and he leaves Neville alone with his dad. Right? So obviously, you know, Helmut.
No language. They can't understand each other.
So you know they're using the universal language of drinking,
of alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. I was on a flight once, and I was coming from Indonesia to Dubai. It's like a 9-hour flight or a 10-hour flight or something like that. I mean, it's a fair old chunk of a journey, and I got an exit seat, and I'm sitting there, and there was me, and then the middle seat was empty, and then there was a Russian dude on the island, and obviously this Russian guy didn't speak a word of English, and obviously I don't speak a word of Russian.
Yeah.
As soon as the drink trolley arrived, this was as you know, I don't drink anymore. This was back when I was a pisshead, and you know, and I'm
still there, by the way. So,
obviously, I was like straight away, I was like, yeah, can I have fucking Jack Daniels, vodka, whatever I was drinking, and the Russian was like, and like me and the Russian like looked at each other, like, you know, like it's like, you know, one alcoholic to another.
A mutual admiration.
A mutual admiration between alcoholics. And me and this Russian fella got absolutely fucking mortal on the flight from Indonesia to Dubai. And like by the end of the flight, me and him were best pals.
Yeah.
Like I say, he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Russian, but between the two of us just sitting there getting smashed, we were like, hey.
I had a similar thing with I had a Swedish girlfriend years ago, and I went over there. Father had his own boat and everything, so the two of us went out on a fishing trip from like 6 o'clock in the morning, and he couldn't speak any English, I couldn't speak any Swedish, but the crate of beers come out. I mean, we had the best time ever, you know.
The international language.
That's it.
So Neville gets left alone with Helmut's dad. Helmut's dad gets a thing of pictures out and starts showing him pictures. And there's a picture of him in a uniform. He's obviously in the Navy. And he starts talking about a ship called the Scharnhorst. So then Neville, you know, obviously as it transpires, Neville's granddad was on another ship that was bombed by the Scharnhorst. So Neville goes into this story, and he manages to, you know, through sign language and whatever, he's like, "Your Helmut's dad," and you know, and he's farter and gross and farter and
yeah.
And anyway, so then the shit, and so he gets the message across to Helmut's dad that his granddad was on this ship that was sunk by the Scharnhorst, and Neville and Helmut's dad goes to make a toast. And then Neville's like, well, he actually died. So
his face when he was killed.
So Neville's told this story, and as it transpires, it basically means that Helmut's dad killed Neville's granddad.
He gets all serious just for a second. His face, you know, he realizes.
He goes, "Oh well, that was a long time ago." And then they have a drink. So cuts back to the site in the morning. Neville is getting dropped off by Helmut on his motorbike in the morning, and Neville's clearly hungover. And they have a bit of a chat, And then Helmut goes off to work and Neville walks onto the site. So as he walks onto the site, Neville is called over by Herr Ulrich. So they walk around to the part of the site where Dennis and Bomber and Oz are there to lay bricks, and Herr Ulrich's he's got he's a couple of tricks up his sleeve, got a bit of news, and Herr Ulrich's he's like, today Neville starts work as a bricklayer, and they're all, yay, you know, and Dennis has got, you know, Dennis has been successful, Neb's happy as a pig in shite, everyone's happy, da 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 da. And then then what does he do? He pulls it out his back pocket. So the camera cuts to Oz, and Oz has, you know, got 2 black eyes and a broken nose, and you know, clearly.
Yeah, I was just looking at a picture of it, actually.
Yeah, so Oz clearly got the worst of the scuffle in the bar, and Herr Ulrich takes great pleasure in turning around and saying, "Yeah, you Osborne.
Osborne, yeah.
You are fired." So he sacks Oz, and you know, they start talking about it, and Dennis is like, you know, he's had it coming, and obviously Neville questions about what he's you know, what happened, and Bomber says, they talk about Oz's nose, and he says, yeah, that happened when his head went through the pinball machine.
That's it, yeah.
And sort of everyone agrees that he had it coming. So, you know, like I say, Oz is...
he says, doesn't Bomber say he's as daft as a brush?
yeah, that's it. But, you know, so Oz has obviously got a reputation for being a tough guy, but, you know, scaffolders, you know, the German scaffolders, you know, them scaffolders, you know, they spend all day lifting metal bars. And,
yeah, my flatmate's a scaffolder, so...
yeah, well, there you go, look at that, I'm sure. And so, you know, they'll be very, very strong, you know, people in that, you know, they're not messing around. And so, you know, Oz obviously clearly, you know, came off worse. So there were, you know, he swung the first shot, but I think there was, you know, probably half a dozen scaffolders there were probably prepared to give Oz a bit of a showing. And, you know, obviously Dennis and whatever says that they tried to break it up, but, you know, they would have tried to separate the fight, but I doubt that they would have been throwing punches back. You know, they would have just been trying to stop Oz getting a kicking, but, you know, they didn't do that good of a job. You know, those 4 or 6 German scaffolders, you know, gave Oz, you know, what he deserved, basically. And Neville's, I don't know, you know, Neville's obviously, you know, he says, oh, he's, you know, he's all right underneath Oz, you know, he's all right. And Bomber says, yeah, it's what's on top that makes him what's on top that makes him a nightmare. And then he says, you know, what's he going to do? And so, you know, Dennis paints this picture of what's going to happen to Oz. So he says, you know, he'll go home, you know, he'll make it up with a wife. Yeah. And then he'll go down the Fat Ox and get palatic. Yeah. You know, palatic's a proper old school Geordie word for getting drunk. And so,
paralytic.
And then so, you know, Bomber's got this picture in his head of going down the local in his hometown and getting drunk. And Bomber, in proper broad Bristolian, he says, "The lucky old bugger, the lucky." So they cut to the admin hut, and Herr Grunwald is paying Oz off, and Oz still behaving like he's been badly treated. You know, Oz is still, you know, pleading the case that he's been hard done by. And he says, you know, that in England the lads would have gone out on strike, and then he's clutching at straws, Oz, trying to think of anything he can say to maybe try and keep his job, and he even plays the race card. He goes, "Because I'm British, isn't it?" And
your knee cause to sack us.
Your knee cause to sack us. And Herr Grunwald's like, "No, I like the British workers. You work fast and da 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 da." And he says, "It wouldn't have happened in England." And Herr Grunwald, again, very dry, says, "But you are not in England. You are in Germany." So they go to cut to the bar. It's after work. Bomber's getting the round in. Oz walks into the bar, and Oz is barred. Like the German barman doesn't want anything to do with Oz. And again, you know, Oz had a massive punch up in there. His head was used to smash up a pinball machine. And Oz is like, what have I done? It's like, well, you had a punch up, that you had a massive punch. You swung the first shot. So, you know, he's obviously blames the Germans for everything that happened. And then Dennis says, you know, you brought it on yourself. And Oz sort of tries, he's got a bit of a half-hearted attempt, tries to rally the troops, and he starts talking about them going out on strike. And Dennis is like, well, that wouldn't do anything. He says, you know, they'd just go and get 6 more British people.
Exactly, yeah.
At the end of us. And Oz is like, Oz says, we have rights. And Dennis is like, no rights? That's what are you talking about? He's like, we've got no rights. We're working in the black area. We're not paying any taxes. And he says, you know, if you want rights, he says, you know, register with the German authorities and pay tax. And again, you know, Oz is like thinking. You can see like his mind's fucking working, trying to think of something he can say. He's like, what you're saying is you won't back us up.
Yeah.
And, you know, Dennis is now sort of famous quoted. He's a bit of a speech he quotes, which is sort of seen as a fairly poignant speech in the thing. And he says, you know, I've seen blokes like you come and go all my life.
Fish out of water.
Exactly, fish out of water. They come out here, they get pissed. Their mother's not there to wash their clothes. They lose their passport. And anyway, Oz, you know, the truth hurts.
Yeah.
The bottom line is you know, the truth is, you know, a fickle mistress, and clearly, you know, Oz knows when he's beaten, but he still has to have the last word, and he sort of stands up and he goes, well, I know when I'm not wanted, like, you know, trying to blame everybody else. So, you know, obviously Dennis and Oz are friends, but, you know, they've had this argument. Oz is walking out. Dennis walks over to the bar, and Barry, so Barry
seeks his opportunity. He sees an opening.
Never want to miss a trick. So Barry never want to miss a trick. You know, goes over and tries to tap up Dennis for the leader's job, and you know, Dennis is having none of it, and he turns around and he goes, Barry, and he says, what? And he goes, piss off, will you?
That was it. Yeah, that's all we need to say.
Yeah. So, you know, so they cut back to the site, and we see our German plasterer going into the admin hut to have a chat. And as we find out, what he's actually doing is, the ironic thing is that the German is going into the admin hut to
That is him there.
Yeah, that's him there, yeah. So the German goes into the admin hut to do for Oz what Oz was asking everybody else to do for him.
Yeah.
So so they cut to the hut, and Oz is packing his gear. And so Oz is packing his gear. He's obviously got the raging ump still, you know. And anyway, so Neville asks Oz to post a letter for him. And clearly, Oz is never going to do this. Like, no. He just goes, all right. Neville puts it down on the bed, and Oz just instantly forgets it's there. And obviously, you know, this is the day when an international letter would have taken quite a while to get there. So, you know, he thinks that if Oz...
Snail mail.
Yeah. So, and he said, everyone's against me. Everyone's against me. And then so, you know, Oz picks up his gear and walks out and leaves Nev's letter on the bed. Like, Nev went, can you post this letter? And Oz went, yes. And then 4 seconds later, he just walks away and leaves the letter. You and your letter, you know what I mean? And Neville picks it up, and then Oz offers him like a little thing of wine gums. He's like, do you want these wine gums?
Yeah. He says, you're a good laugh, Oz.
Yeah, well, and again, and he repeats, you know, that he's badly. He's like, I don't know why everyone's against me. You know, again, he's bad. You know, protesting that he's badly treated. So they cut to Dennis in the admin hut, and so the thing that Dennis has been avoiding, you know, a couple of scenes ago, he told Barry to piss off. You know. Yeah. A bomber, he doesn't want the job as a leader.
But he does still feel a bit responsible, doesn't he? I mean,
he does.
In the back, yeah.
Well, he's been trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid becoming the democratically elected leader.
The gaffer.
And they cut, and they're in the admin hut, and Herr Grunwald just turns around to him and says, "You are the lead person." And Dennis is like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" He's like, "No, I'm not." Dennis protests. I'm not. But basically, Herr Grunwald has just said, "You're the leader."
Yeah.
I lump it. Yeah. So Dennis protests a little bit, but then Grunwald gives him the information that they've been waiting. That the good news. He says Osborne can stay. So Dennis is perplexed and shocked and surprised, but then Dagmar tells Dennis what happened, and obviously it was the German plasterers had the fight with Oz that came in and stuck up for them, and the German plasterers threatened to go on strike because they said it would look bad on them if Oz lost the job because of the punch-up.
Yeah.
So, like I say, the ironic thing is that what Oz wanted, Oz actually gets, but he doesn't get it from the people that he actually asked for.
Yeah.
But I love this bit. This is like the first signs of romance brewing between Dagmar and Dennis.
Yeah.
There's a little look.
A few furtive looks. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see that Dagmar clearly fancies Dennis and vice versa. So there's the blossom, the first blossom of romance between
seeds.
And the seeds that are very, very good there, George. Yeah, the seeds of romance, Dagmar and Dennis. And anyway, so but Dennis can't be chatting up women. He's got shit to do.
That's it. Yeah.
And he goes and finds the Germans, and he says thank you to the Germans, and he invites the Germans round for a drink to say thank you later on that night. And then he gets Barry, and they jump on the back of Barry's bike, and they go and they find Oz, who was on a bus, obviously on his way to the train station. So they cut back to the hut, and they are, everyone's in a good mood. So they've got the dartboard up, and they're setting up a light for the darts. The camera shows that they've got several cases of beer.
Yeah, Beck's.
And everyone is in a good mood in the hut, and even Oz. And this, what we as the viewer, we expect the Oz's attitude to have completely changed.
Yeah, well, you think so, wouldn't you?
This is what any normal person would do. Would be like, they lost their job, they got their job back, and they got their job back because of the German fellas that they had to punch up with. Yeah. So they are, and then he gets a bit complimentary. So they talk about how much beer that they've got, and Oz, in very, very broad old school Geordie, he compliments the Germans, and he says they drink Varney as much as us.
Yeah.
Which means nearly as much as us. Varney is a proper old school Geordie word.
Oh, right, yeah.
You don't, like I say, you don't really get that these days, but you are very, you wouldn't expect to hear that a lot these days, but it is a proper old school Geordie word. So, Oz is, he's smiling. He's got his job back. He's got his job back because of the Germans, and then he's being complimentary about the Germans. And one of the best things that Oz could say about anybody, German or not, is that you can nearly drink as much beer. Yeah. Could you pay a better compliment?
A bigger compliment, yeah.
Absolutely not. So anyway, so Dennis decides to give Oz and obviously everybody else a pep talk. He's like, right, we're gonna have a good night. He says, you especially, Oz. He says it's just a darts match. It's not World War III. He says this darts match to cement the harmony and the goodwill between the British and the Eric workers.
He's still clearly worried that something might go wrong. So
yeah, exactly. But the attitude and the atmosphere in the hut is one of joviality
Yeah.
And you know, everyone's happy, and Oz is happy, and he's making compliments, and they're drinking beer, and the Germans are going to come round, and the German's got his job back, and you know, and we've got to the point now where Moxie's arrived, and Oz has got his job, and Neville's a bricklayer, and everything's settled down. You know, from when they arrived, it was all and then settling down like that, and now that, you know, it's just about to be able to go forward, and they're going to be able to do their jobs properly and make some decent money. And Oz, you know, he says, well, he says, you know, he says, that's fine. He says, but, you know, we've still got to try and hammer these Germans. He says, when we're playing darts, he says, we've still got to try and hammer them Germans. And like, Dennis is like, well, why? You know, like, he's, you know, he's thinking you know, Dennis's thought process is the same as mine, in the fact that, you know, everyone's happy and and Oz, you know, clearly just had, like, you know, like a fucking, like a dog with a bone, won't let it. And he says, why have we got to fucking hammer the Germans? And Oz just turns around and says, because them's the bastards that
bomb me granny.
Bastards that bomb me granny. So, you know, look, as you know, it was like I say earlier on, when we were in the bar and Neville like had that pause where he said, oh, I'm really sorry, Dennis.
Yeah.
A couple of seconds later, he went, but what about me?
Mm.
They employed that same kind of thing. You know, Dennis has laid the land over. Oz is happy. You know, his attitude towards the Germans has changed. You know, he's being complimentary about the Germans, and then 2 seconds later, he's like, "But them's the boss bastards that bomb me." So, yeah, and then that's it. That's the end of the episode. So, you know, obviously things can only get better. Like I say, they've laid the, you know, it's taken the first 2 episodes was very much, you know, setting up the premise, laying down the foundations, moving forward, and now the Magnificent Seven are in place. Moxie's arrived. You know, Neville's working as a bricklayer. Oz is back. Oz has got his job back, and everyone is happy. But like I say, Oz will, you know, never ever. His attitude towards the Germans, I don't think, is ever going to change.
No.
Yes, but that's it. Episode 2, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I am very much, you know, very much. Even though, I mean, like, I must have watched these, you know, many times. I mean, you know, how many times have I watched Auf Wiedersehen Pet in my life? 20, 30, 40, 50. I don't.
Yeah.
You know, I remember we had them all on video when I was a kid. And so, you know, I used to watch them over and over again as a child. So, you know, I've seen it so many times. But yeah, it's, you know, still now, you know, watching them years later, makes me laugh out loud with the quality of the writing. And
well, that's what a classic does that, doesn't it? I mean, you never get bored with it.
So, obviously the titles come up, and the you know, the Magnificent Seven, they get the titles. You know, the people that get a mention on the titles are Herr Grunwald, Herr Ulrich, Dagmar, the German TV reporter, Helmut, his father, mother, and his wife, the barman, the German digger driver, and the German workers, the German plasterers. So that is the end of episode season 1, episode 2, Who Won the War? If you have anything, constructive criticism, compliments, or insults, please feel free to fire me or George an email on aufwiedersehenagain@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram @Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter @Auf Again. You can follow us, please like the Facebook page of Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and click the bell down below to make sure that you get the new episodes. And new episodes will be released every Friday at 10 a.m. We're also available on all good podcast platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcast, Breaker FM, and Soundcloud. So you can listen on any of those platforms. And like I say, new episodes released every Friday. Our theme music was composed and performed by Lee Dosky. So please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, our sponsor for the show was Top Gun Tattooing, number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. Their website is topguntattoo.co.uk. Telephone them on 01189 968 667. And if you say to Zach, Hadaway and Shiteman, you'll get a 20% discount off any tattoo. And if you want to get a Neville and Lottie tattoo, I'll pay for it.
Yeah, that's a bargain. That's a bargain, I think, definitely.
You can't get much better than that, can you?
No.
There you go. So that's it for episode 2. We'll be back with episode 3. And in the meantime, like I said, don't hesitate to follow us on the social media platforms and send us an email. But until then,
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Oh, yeah, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I pieced out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but I don't